Hi, and welcome back to day 4 of the Archer Sew Along. Today is all about interfacing. This can be an overwhelming topic for some, but hopefully today's lesson clarifies it a bit. We'll be discussing how to choose interfacing, where to apply it, and how to apply it. So let's get started. Interfacing is a layer of fabric used on the inside of a garment to reinforce or add rigidity to the area of application. On a shirt like the Archer, you'll find interfacing used on the collar stand, the front button band, and the cuffs. This adds strength to the higher stress button band area, helps to keep the cuffs from wearing down as quickly, and provides shape for the collar and collar stand. Interfacing comes in 2 application types, fusible and sew-in. Fusible interfacing is dotted with small spots of glue that, with heat, adhere to the fabric. It's very common in garments, and it's what we use when making the Archer. Sew-in interfacing, like its name suggests, needs to be sewn into the garment. Interfacing comes in many weaves as well as weights, but I won't address all of them here since this is about interfacing for the Archer and not a tour of all types of interfacing. For the Archer, we recommend using a woven interfacing that is close in weight or slightly lighter than your fabric. You want the drape of the interfacing to have a similar weight to your fabric. That way you aren't affecting the way the final garment acts or hangs. For my linen Archer, I'm using a lightweight fusible interfacing. I'll now walk you through a few different types of interfacing and show you how they react with a few different types of fabric. So here we have a nice lightweight fusible. It's woven and it's made on a loom, same as woven fabric. One smooth side, one side with small glue dots, and this is what will adhere to your fabric. And you can see it has great drape. It's not going to restrict your fabric. So here is a cotton shirting. You can see the drape of this pretty well. And then once the interfacing is adhered, you can see the drape remains. It's just slightly more stable, has a little more body. And then here's the linen I'll be using without any interfacing. You can see the drape is nice. And then similar drape, just more body with the lightweight woven fused to the back. If you're unable to find a lightweight woven interfacing, I'd recommend using a tricot fusible. Tricot interfacing is a knit, as the name implies. Despite that, you can use it on woven fabrics. It has a great drape and is available in a number of different weights. So here you can see the drape of the tricot. And then again, it's almost identical to the woven on these 2 fabrics. One interfacing I would avoid at all costs is bonded interfacing. This interfacing is made much the way that plyboard is made. Many fibers are laid out at varying directions, resulting in a stiff fabric that has no grain line, no real drape, and will not allow the fabric to hang as intended. Bonded interfacing does have its place for things like bag making, but I would steer clear of it in your garments. Here you can see it's really just very stiff, and this is a lightweight too. This is not very heavy. Here it is applied to the linen. There's really no drape, and here it is applied to the cotton. And again, you can see this is with nothing, and this is with the bonded interfacing. Again, bonded interfacing with nothing. So you can see just how stark the difference between the drape of the 2 parts of your garment will be if you use bonded interfacing. And here's a little example. This is a yard of lightweight bonded interfacing. You can see how stable and stiff that is. This is 6 yards of lightweight fusible. So you can see just how stark the difference is between the 2 and why you would want to use the woven over the bonded in your garments. Cutting your interfacing is very similar to cutting your fabric. In the case of woven and tricot interfacing, there is a grain line, and you'll want to make sure that you adhere to it so the fabric isn't fighting the grain of your fabric. Woven interfacing does have a selve edge, so you can see it's slightly darker here, and there are small holes right along here. All right, you're going to lay your interfacing out the same way you do your fabric. You're going to fold it in half and put the selve edges together. And I like to fold it with the 2 glue sides facing. That way they don't stick to my pattern pieces, anything like that. And again, make sure you're not getting any torquing. You can see I am. Just smooth that out. And there we go. I like to place a few weights just so the interfacing isn't moving. It's very slippery. You don't want it moving while you're trying to cut. So go ahead and grab the pieces that you'll need to cut out of fusible. We have the left front button band, the cuff, the right front button band, the upper collar, and we'll need to cut. So the collar stands are cut on the fold. I do pin this to my fusible. And usually I'm a scissors person, but for cutting fusible, I find it easiest to just go around it with a rotary cutter. Tracing off on a fusible is honestly just like a nightmare. I don't like doing it. If you found a really great trick to tracing it off that doesn't include sandwiching it between paper, please let me know. But yeah, so I just pin mine in place. And you can see these are on the grain, cut on the fold for your fabric. They're cut on the fold for your fusible. Now for the cuff, you're going to want to make sure that's running along the grain. Then you're going to take your rotary cutter and you're just going to trace around these. Now make sure your rotary has cut through everything. And then grab your scissors and mark your notches. Now here's a trick that I do for my front bands, because pinning and cutting a long thin piece of interfacing is kind of a pain. So what I do is I just measure my pieces. So this piece is 24 3/4 long by 1.5 inches wide. So what I'll do is I'll cut a straight edge here. You're going to want to cut off the selvage. So that's about 1 inch in. And I'm just cutting a piece a little bit longer than I need right now. Make sure that all came apart. Then I'm cutting 1.5 inches wide. So here you can see my piece. And we're just gonna scoot this down so that it touches the 0 mark. (24 3/4) is here, so make sure everything is straight. You just cut across it, and that's just an easy way to cut your rectangles. So you'll repeat that for the thinner left front button band. Since you're essentially gluing something to your fabric when you apply fusible interfacing, you're going to want to make sure you place a cloth underneath your fabric to keep the glue off your ironing board cover. And you'll also need something between the interfacing and the iron so that you don't end up with glue on your iron's sole plate. I use a piece of muslin for this. I like to give my press cloth a press. That way I just know it's smooth and not transferring wrinkles to my fusible. When you purchase your interfacing, there should be instructions on how to apply it to your fabric. If there are, you'll want to follow those. If there aren't, you might need to do a bit of testing with your fabric and fusible to determine the best method. Here's how I adhere mine. So we'll start with the upper collar. You're going to give that a press. Wrong side facing up. And then you're going to lay your interfacing down on top of it with the glue side facing down. You want the glue touching the wrong side of the fabric because we're going to glue that to the fabric. Take your press cloth and cover it. Make sure you're not sliding it around. And then we're going to press. We're not going to iron because that will move the interfacing around. You're just going to put the iron down and hold. I usually start with 10 seconds and then move to the next position. And I am using a very hot iron. I have the steam on low. It's just steaming fumes inside of my iron. And you can see how I had to peel it off at the end there. But now we have a nicely fused collar. And you can see on the back if it doesn't adhere. It did adhere here, but you'll still be able to see the outline of the glue dots, and if it hasn't, just go back in and press again. So that is the upper collar. You're going to do the same thing for the collar stand. Make sure it's laid out with as little distortion as possible. Give it a little press. Align your collar stand fusible and make sure the two are aligned. Gently cover it back up with your press cloth. Again, making sure you don't move the fusible off of the pattern piece. And there we have that. And you can see here, the interfacing did shift a little bit, how it's not perfectly aligned here. I would just cut that extra interfacing off. This is within the seam allowance, so it's not a big deal. You're going to fuse your cuffs in the same manner. And your second cuff. And that's it for all the small pieces. Now we're going to talk about the front button band and the left front. All right, so for the right front button band, we're only fusing half of this. If you have a very thin fabric, you can go ahead and fuse the whole thing, but regular fabric, you really only need to fuse half. So you can see on my stripe, both sides are not going to be the same. The side that has the notch is the side that's going to face forward. So just remember that. And I like to fuse that side. So I'll take my fusible and I'll align it with that side. Cover with my press cloth and press. Remove your press cloth and you're all set on that front. All right, now for the right front, you can see we have a few sets of notches at the top and the bottom. And what happens here is we'll be folding along those notches to create the button band. This is the band that the buttons will sew to, so it's less important that the fusible is on the outside. So I bury it in the center. Let me just press that out a second. Creased my linen. So lay your front piece out with the wrong side facing up and just make sure that the front is straight. I have a shifty linen, so I'm actually going to align mine to a ruler. That way I make sure my interfacing goes on extra straight. So here you can see we have now a nice straight edge. And you can see the first notch is at 1 inch. So the interfacing is going to be 1 inch over from that edge. So I like to take my interfacing and I align it at the top, then align it at the bottom with the notches. And you can see it doesn't quite, it's a long stretch. So getting it to lay straight is going to take a little finagling, and that's where your seam gauge comes in. Just every so often, make sure it's in the right spot. There we go. Now that it's properly aligned, we'll cover and press. remove your press cloth and just check to make sure that everything is fused. This looks good. So we're all set. All right, so that is it for today. Our archers are fused and we are ready to sew. I hope that answered your archer related fusible questions. And if not, let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel via the link below so you don't miss any of our sewing lessons. And get ready because in the next lesson, we will be assembling the button bands. I'll see you back here for that. Bye.